Hey everyone, and welcome to my Top 100 Films Part 3. I've already done numbers 100 through 51. This is going to be numbers 50 through 26, Part 3 of 4. I've been counting down my favourite films and discussing why I'm picking these, and that's essentially what I'm going to do. We're going to get straight into it pretty much, but I'm just going to remind you before we start that I am asking you guys to submit your own top 50 movies lists to mftvquestions@gmail.com. And next month, because the deadline's at the end of the month, the end of August 2019, next month, based on where your movie entries place, your number one will get X amount of points, number two will get Y amount of points, and so on and so on. And next month will be a results show with a top 100 films as voted for by you guys. So that's something we're doing. So please do go over and submit your top 50 movies. You're not submitting a top 100, you're just submitting a top 50. And make sure they're numbered and it's very clear, that this which is the high end and so on. And just, send them in and we'll see how the results line up. We've had quite a number so far put in, so looking forward to receiving more of them from you guys. And we'll see what the results end up looking like. So without further ado, we'll get into my my next pick, my number 50. My number 50 is The Shining, which, of course, Stanley Kubrick in 1980, based on the Stephen King book, although, as I understand it, not too similar to the book. I've never read the book. I have no idea what the differences are. I have no idea why specifically King doesn't like it very much. But this film is fantastic. The Shining is... It's one of those examples. I think I said this earlier with another director. I think it was Werner Herzog I mentioned on Nosferatu, but it's one of those things where this director really only did one horror film. Kubrick only did this. He did science fiction in a couple of films. He did, some war movies, did some dramas, so on and so on. But this was his only outright horror movie that I at least can think of right now off the top of my head. And he's phenomenal at it. It's this slow burn of Jack Nicholson going crazy. And just this wonderful location. Cinematography is beautiful. In fact, I can say this now because obviously we're building up to the release of the sequel later this year, and the trailer for Doctor Sleep came out a little while ago, and one of the things that stuck out in that trailer is that it's a couple of points they cut back to footage from the original Shining. And it was like the worst thing they could possibly do, because all it did was point out how much better The Shining looked than the new film, just purely on a visual standpoint. It cuts to Danny on the little what do you call it? Tricycle? Is that a tricycle? I think it's a tricycle. No, it's not. Is it a tricycle? Yeah, it is. It's a tricycle. Anyway, there's the shot of him going around the hotel, and it just looks so mesmerizing. The set design, the everything in choice. Whereas the footage from the new movie just looks like a very sort of generic modern horror movie. There's nothing really striking about it. Whereas The Shining is beautiful from start to finish, and has full of memorable moments. It's full of this sense of impending doom throughout the entire thing. And you kind of, you find yourself rooting for characters and nervous about the deterioration of Jack's mind. So, no, Shining's fantastic. Number 49 is Explorers, which came out in 1985 and is directed by Joe Dante. Joe Dante's a director who, of course, is loved by many for a lot of his different films. Obviously, Gremlins, The Burbs, Small Soldiers, the original Howling, of course, which is actually a bit of an outlier in that the rest of his films all feel very kid-friendly, whereas the first Howling isn't at all. Not really. I mean, obviously, I was the type of kid who would want to watch it, but the rest of them all have at least a kid tangent to them. And this is a film about three kids, one of whom is Ethan Hawke in a very young role, and it's about them building a spaceship because they just they kind of accidentally discover they can make this bubble that they can fly things around in, so they build a spaceship. And it came out the same year as The Goonies, and it is a very comparable film in the just what it's focusing on, the type of characters that are in it, the sense of childhood adventure. But unlike The Goonies, which is about getting into caves and looking for pirate treasure, this is about going to space, which is why for me it actually in a way ranks a little bit higher than The Goonies, because space just always was cooler to me. I never really cared about pirates. I love The Goonies, but I never really cared about pirates. Space, though, I was always into. I've always been into science fiction. And Joe Dante, I love Joe Dante. It was one of those things where I never realized so many films that I had seen came from that director until, I was in my late teens or whatever, and I started paying more attention to these things, and I was kind of like, oh, Joe Dante directed all these movies, and I kind of like them all. They all have this sense of charm to them, which Joe Dante does very well, and a lot of this film is about my personal attachment to it. I grew up watching this. I was watching this from a young age, just like the Goonies, and have a lot of love for it. But I do think it's a really fun. Some people don't like the last act. Some people don't like when they actually get to space. I have fun with that stuff, but for me, it's about the idea that three kids can just build their own spaceship and just go for it. And that sense of adventure, much like the Goonies has, is wonderful. And this is the type of movie that makes me feel like a kid again when I'm watching it. And again, and much like the Goonies, they're kind of edgy. They say shit and stuff like that. They aren't just kids from today's movies that are all sweet and innocent and yada yada yada. So no, I guess I highly recommend this, but with the caveat of it is what it is, and if what I have said is appealing to you, then I think you'll find a lot of charm in it. Number 48 is Phantasm, which was directed by Don Coscarelli, came out in 1979, and is one of the most underappreciated films in the horror genre, I think, in terms of what I think of as the big horror classics. Phantasm belongs in the pantheon with a lot of other big movies, and it doesn't seem to get put there as much. I saw this in my late teens. It was a little bit later on for me, but the music's iconic. The music's kind of like the Halloween theme, where you hear the theme and you know it's Phantasm, and it's kind of it deserves to be in that same conversation. I'm not saying it's better than the Halloween theme, but I'm saying that it deserves to be in that conversation. Very memorable cast. Reggie's great, but of course Angus Scrimm as the tall man is a standout as the villain, who plays a mysterious grave robber who has an arsenal of little soldiers who have kind of like robes on and like hoods, kind of. The main character is this kid who discovers what the tall man is up to and tries to prove it, and gets himself into a lot of trouble. His older brother doesn't believe him at first, and it's about trying to expose the weird thing that's going on in the town. And you really get the sense that some evil presence has moved into the town, and it plays with your expectations, it plays with all these things. But more than anything else, this film has an incredible atmosphere, and it feels like a very, very tight mood piece, but which is backed up with lots and lots of like hinted at mythology. So despite the fact that this is an ultra low budget film that was made essentially at the weekends over like a year-long period or something like that, whilst everyone more or less still had day jobs during the week, it's amazing what they achieved with this and how it stands the test of time 40 years later. And low budget movies today, like I feel like most low budget movies I see that go straight to VOD all kind of look and feel the same, or for the most part do. And you look back at the 70s and it almost feels like because it was harder to do, because they had to get film cameras, because they had to do all these things, that it did raise the barrier of trying a little bit. And while it's great that more people have the opportunity, it does mean we have a lot more generic stuff that we have to wade through to get to the good stuff. And I think Phantasm is an example of just, no, we can do this. We're going to do it. Even though it's impossible, we're going to do it. And, obviously for every Phantasm, there's like thousands of low-budget movies that aren't worth your time. But it's, every so often you get a gem like this. You get something that becomes a classic. And Phantasm is that. Number 47 is Robocop, which came out in 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven. This is a science fiction film where a cop by the name of Alex Murphy is gunned down in the not too distant future of Detroit, where things have went very violent. So everyone loves to joke that this very accurately predicted the way Detroit would end up being. Every movie I've ever seen about Detroit just convinces me that Detroit's not a place you should go. The other examples I can think of are It Follows and Don't Breathe. They all paint Detroit as kind of being this depressing place. If you live in Detroit and it's lovely, feel free to tell me, but movies do not paint a pretty picture. So yeah, he's gunned down, and OCP, this corporation, turned him into Robocop, a cyborg who works on the police force. And it's a satire film. It's a film with lots of great quirky ideas. And this is a film where I saw a lot as a kid and loved because it was it was Robocop. It was badass. But as I've gotten older and I watched the film, for the first time maybe in my early 20s, discovered just how fantastic the film was with its themes, with its satire, with its character arc about individualism and not being just part of the system. I won't get into spoilers, but let's just say the final moment of the film is very triumphant and from a character perspective, and I fist pump every time when he's asked a certain question and he gives his answer. It's a beautiful moment at the end. Because the film's about being swallowed up by the system and not really being a person anymore. It's about being just one of their assets, just being a number on a spreadsheet, and ultimately taking back who you are and no, I am me, and it doesn't matter. And it's beautiful. It's a beautifully told film. And it's got lots of violence, it's got lots of action, it's got a fantastic score. The music in this is, I will say it, this is, the music in Robocop is top 10 of all time. I'm going to say that. The score from the composer whose name, it's Basil something. Let me just click on it and find it. Composer Basil Poledouris, if I'm saying his name remotely right. It's so bombastic, it's so beautifully epic, and it's meant to, kind of add to the satire of it, but also has a genuine emotional core underneath. This is actually a very heartfelt film, despite the fact that it's Robocop and you've got people being melted by acid and 100 million bullets flying into people at certain points. It's got a lot more going for it than just what it is. It's actually, for me, Paul Verhoeven's never even come close to Robocop, and I've not seen all of his movies, admittedly, but it's actually a very rich film, and I encourage people to, if you've not seen this since you were young, watch it again. Think about what it's saying about human beings, because there's actually a lot in there that's really, really strong. And yeah, this is a film that ages like fine wine. It gets better every time I see it. Number 46 is Kickass from 2010, directed by Matthew Vaughn. And I was going to say this is a recent entry, and it is a recent film, relatively speaking, but I actually can't believe it's 9 years old already, which is making me feel like time is passing by in the blink of an eye. And that rhymed. But Kickass was a super big surprise for me. I went into it knowing very little. I'd seen the trailer, thought the trailer was okay, and was actually blown away. I actually came out of it thinking it was one of the best movies I'd seen that year at the time. And I don't know if this was before or after a certain other film in 2010, which will definitely be popping up on this list, but it was definitely one of my highlights of the year. And Kickass, I think at face value looks kind of obnoxious, and the proof of that is definitely the sequel, which was not directed by Matthew Vaughn and is just a complete travesty and a train wreck and has nothing of what makes Kickass so good. Kickass is not just about the jokes and the humor, although the jokes and the humor are mostly pretty great. Kickass has a lot of heart, and much like Robocop, actually, there's a lot of satire in here, but there is a genuine heart about people doing the right thing and about family and about what people mean to each other, and it also happens to be one of the best action movies of the last decade. Matthew Vaughn is, I think, the best action director working today. I think his Kingsman films, while I prefer Kick-Ass in terms of its concept, I love his Kingsman films, even with their flaws, because the action is just so impeccable. The action is stylish in a way that doesn't feel obnoxious. It feels like I feel like I'm in the room. I feel like I'm following the action, like I'm part of the fight at times. It's great stuff, and I remember being so pumped coming from this. There's certain scenes with Hit Girl towards in the last sort of third of the movie. There's a rescue sequence and a hallway sequence, and everything just made me root for this girl so much. It was really, really great. But there's a heart, and it's got a wonderful soundtrack as well. I always like to bring that up when it's applicable, and it's a very unique soundtrack because a lot of it's actually taken from other movies, but they don't just take the track from the other movie, they take it and do their own version of it and then kind of evolve it. The main Kick-Ass theme is actually kind of inspired by other music that's in the movie, which is from other movies. So much like some films will take, popular songs, this takes popular tracks from other movies that it wants to use. But it uses them very effectively, and like I say, it kind of weaves it into the score in a way that some of the little motifs come back in other tracks with their own original music, and it's very interesting. And it is very funny, and you got Nicolas Cage doing his terrible Batman impression, and I say that in a loving way. No, I think Kick-Ass is a delightful time. I think it's got a lot of heart, and is genuinely quite touching. And the plot of the movie is basically just a young kid, a teenager, decides to be a superhero, gets himself a really cheap suit, tries to be a superhero, and nearly gets himself killed repeatedly. And there's a lot going on in there. So Mark Strong's a great villain, a lot going on. So Kickass is wonderful, and despite the title, which makes it sound like it's going to be this edgy little shitty thing which is going to make my eyes roll, it's actually a very heartwarming experience. So Kickass is great. Number 45 is Shame, which was directed by Steve McQueen, came out in 2011. So yeah, Steve McQueen's second entry on my list here. Shame is a wonderful, dark, and what's the word I'm looking for? It's very intimate in a very uncomfortable way. You feel like you're spying on someone and you're in their private life, and it's a film about sex addiction. And Michael Fassbender is the lead, and he has sex addiction problems. That's what the film is about, and how he tries to deal with this and how it affects his relationships with other people, how he struggles to connect with other people in a way that isn't just pure sex, and his attempts to try and go beyond that, and how it might completely derail people in his life. The film is very emotional, and it's one of those things where I was looking forward to it because I'd liked Steve McQueen's previous film that I'd seen. I'd seen Hunger, and this looked interesting from the trailers. Because this was before 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave was his next film after this, so obviously I went into that even more like hyped for it. This was one where I liked his previous film. I thought he was a good filmmaker, and this film here just was such a deep, like, complex character study, just focusing on the one person. In a weird way, it almost makes me think of American Psycho, and not in tone and not in like what the character's doing, just in the way that we're kind of with him the whole time and the way he thinks, and that's kind of the thought process we're in throughout the movie. But it's obviously not as satirical as that. It's a lot more thoughtful and has a lot to say about addiction. The addiction in this case happens to be sex, but I don't think it's actually that important that that's the addiction in particular. The addiction, if it was something else, would perhaps equally affect the things around him. But it's a really wonderful study. It does a great job of, like, despite the fact that it has numerous sex scenes and numerous pieces of nudity, does a great job of never actually feeling remotely as sexy or attractive. It feels kind of grimy, and it feels kind of passionless the entire time, and does a really great job of just emulating the almost mundanity of, like, he needs his next hit, but it doesn't actually seem like it's actually that exciting or titillating, I suppose, to put it that way. And yeah, Carey Mulligan's in there as well, also does a good job. Not a great score in this. I'm finding a lot of good scores on my list here, because it's a big part of movie making to me is the scores, and that's another one that stuck out to me when I saw it. So deeply introverted character study of a very specific type of character that I don't think I've seen much in terms of film, in terms of the medium of film exploring. So this was a very, very intense watch at an emotional level. Number 44 is Jaws, obviously Steven Spielberg, 1975. It's a movie about a shark. It's a movie about a shark eating people near a beach. In a small town. Amity Island, specifically. July 4th's coming up. The mayor's refusing to close the beaches, doesn't believe they've got a problem, and of course there's a shark. And it's funny, watching this again fairly recently, really, there's a lot of great character work in this movie. There's a lot of great character work about building up to the decision to go onto the water, and the last final act, which takes place on the boat. You've got a great cast here: Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss, Robert Shaw, all fantastic. It's got a lot of wit. It's got some genuinely great scares. It's kind of a horror movie. I would never really put it on the horror shelf, as it were. I'd always kind of put it with the thrillers or whatever. I think just because it doesn't necessarily feel like a horror movie to me in the traditional sense, but it does have a lot of great moments. And it's one of those classic stories where you've heard, the shark didn't look very good, so they had to hide it, and therefore it's more effective. But I think that is kind of not giving Spielberg enough credit, because I think Spielberg's a smart enough director to know That choice he made of this isn't working, we have to hide it more. That was a very well informed choice. It wasn't just like he had to make that choice. A lesser director would just show it anyway, for example. So I think obviously the music's classic. John Williams doing his dun dun, and you have memorable characters. Every time I watch it, I love Dreyfus like verbally sparring with everyone around him. Shaw is very intense. He's got that big opening, and you barely see him again until that last third of the movie. He has that big opening where he's like, "Nah, I'll hunt the shark for you for a price." Blah 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 blah. And it's not until things get very dire that they go to him, of course. But no, it's like all shark movies forever after this are compared to Jaws. And there's a couple of fun ones. Like, it's not like there's no other good shark movies, but none of them come close to Jaws. Like, Jaws just took the idea and did everything with it that it could be done at the time. And yeah, and there's another one that I grew up with. So, of course, there's a lot of personal attachment and whatever else. So, number 43 is Hero, which came out in 2002 and is directed by Zhang Yimou. This is a film starring Jet Li and Zhang Ziyi. This was actually right in the early days of me trying foreign film. I think I'd only seen a few foreign movies before I tried this one. And this was back when I was just buying DVDs for cheap in my high school days. Just grabbing things. This was maybe like a year or two after it came out, so it wasn't like brand new when I saw it. And I'd actually seen House of Flying Daggers first and really liked it. So I grabbed Hero. And this is one that, like, I wouldn't necessarily say that I am a fan of the genre that this is from, which I believe is a wuxia genre. People who are more knowledgeable on this than me can tell me about that. But I love this film. It is a beautiful story of different viewpoints going through one story, and it does all this with great cinematic flair and great color because, Jet Li goes to see the Emperor to tell him what happened when he went after the people who tried to assassinate him, or were plotting to assassinate him. And he tells the story, and when he tells the story, everyone in the flashback is wearing a specific color. I can't remember the order of the colors, but let's just say it was blue the first time. So they were all wearing blue robes, in the background had blue like curtains and towels and the shelves and things like that. There's a lot of blue. And then the Emperor points out a flaw in his story that doesn't make sense, and he tells it again and adds more. But the second time we see it, everything's red or green or whatever. And we go through this, and the whole movie takes place over him sitting telling the Emperor the story, but we get the flashbacks as we go. And it's this beautiful story about coming to a sort of realization and making a sacrifice for what you believe is important. And the ending's really good because you kind of come to realize the meaning of the story and what's important, what the characters are fighting for, and why they believe certain things need to happen. The action's very stylized. There's a lot of the spinning and the I'd call it the low gravity martial arts, which looks really great. There's a great fight in a lake at one point, which is just beautiful to look at. And yeah, because I remember when this came out, they kind of like billed it as Tarantino Presents, because Tarantino was just kind of helping promote it essentially for English speaking audiences. But Hero's a great movie, and it's something I'd highly recommend. If you're someone who's still not quite dabbled in foreign cinema yet, I would highly recommend this as one of your early entry points, especially if you want to get into Chinese cinema. And this would be one that I would put out there first as just being this stunning epic with a human heartfelt story that I don't know how based on like history this is. I feel like it's mostly just fictional, but there is an element of like tying into like history and the idea of the meaning behind the country and things like that, which is really cool. So Hero's fantastic. Number 42 is Collateral, which came out in 2004 and is directed by Michael Mann. Second Michael Mann movie. There's a lot of doubles on this list, apparently. I mean, unless some of these become triples in the next 40-odd numbers, that's entirely possible. But Collateral is a film. This is the first Michael Mann film I ever saw. I saw this in theaters, based purely on reviews. I remember I had friends who wanted to go to the theater one night. We'd seen a lot of other things recently, and I had seen a couple of good reviews or a couple of, message board threads talking about how good Collateral was, and I said, let's go see Collateral because it's meant to be good. and they just kind of trusted me. And I'm glad they did, because I ended up loving Collateral. It's a film about Jamie Foxx, who plays a cab driver, and Tom Cruise plays a hitman. Tom Cruise gets in his cab and pays him for the rest of the night. Says, "Hey, I want you to drive me around all night. I'll give you, X $100, and this is essentially double what you'd make in a night, just for sort of being my personal chauffeur for the duration." But of course, it quickly becomes apparent that he is a hitman, that he's going around killing people, and it becomes more of a hostage situation almost, as Tom Cruise is going around killing people. It's a wonderful premise. It all takes place in one night. It's exactly the sort of premise that I kind of really sink my teeth into and get into, because I love the sort of the passing of the night, and obviously the police are getting more involved as the night goes on, and it's like, do they know that he's innocent? Do they know that he's working for the hitman, and so on? Some people think the ending's a little bit too kind of cliche. I enjoy the ending, and I get why people say that, but for me, it's kind of this tightly woven story. It is very much a little gritty thriller that looks fantastic. The night cinematography is great. It looks beautiful. But it is also a very Hollywood movie in that sense, but it's a very tight Hollywood movie. And I think the performances from both the leads are very good, and I love movies that not quite real time, because obviously several hours pass over the course of the film, but I love movies that take place like, something like Die Hard, where it's all one night. I love that. I love things taking place in a short span of time, and just the actual moment to moment tension, the moment to moment sort of thrills of it, where Jamie Foxx doesn't really know if he's going to be alive for the morning. Is this his last night on Earth? Is this hitman going to kill him after he's done with all of his targets? Because now he knows his face and things like that. I love it. Wonderfully tense, beautifully shot. Yeah. Collateral is fantastic. Number 41 is Taxi Driver, 1976, directed by Martin Scorsese, of course. This is a film which is gritty and grimy and gets into under your skin, gets into your mind, and kind of plays with it. I remember seeing this for the first time. It was late one night. It was on TV. It was playing at like midnight, and just getting into the grimy world of 70s New York, and you really get into the mind. You get a little bit delirious. You kind of go along with the character of Travis, and who's played by Robert De Niro, of course, and his performance is fantastic. It's one of these movies where I think that some sort of, this feels like a really snobby thing to say, but some mainstream fans, that's so snobbish to say it that way, but kind of misinterpret the point of Taxi Driver. It's a very dark and bleak film. And I think it's one that deserves a lot of analysis. I'm sure one day we'll review it on the channel and go in depth on it. But it's a film where you just kind of find yourself going along for the ride with this mad person and his deterioration into what he becomes. And yeah, it's kind of like, it goes along with, First Blood was on my list earlier, and this is also about a Vietnam vet who's, kind of struggling with who he is after coming back from the war, and kind of like trying to find some of his thrills again. It's not the exact same as First Blood, of course, but it's the same kind of post-Vietnam struggle that the film's about, as is First Blood. So we've got that going on. Jodie Foster's in there as a young prostitute, and you got Harvey Keitel's in there as well. There's a lot of really, really just... It's funny because we've been doing The Deuce for the last couple of years. Season 3 of that's hitting soon, and it definitely, like, when I was watching The Deuce, it made me think of Taxi Driver a little bit, just because it's that era of New York. And New York does feel like a character in this movie. It feels like, some movies are just set where they're set, and it doesn't really matter that they're in New York or LA or middle of Wyoming or wherever else. But sometimes the city is a character in of itself, and this is definitely one of those movies. Even just the idea of being a taxi driver, the idea of like that's what he's doing all night is just going around the city, makes it feel like, yeah, this is what it is. This is the second main character of the story. This is the urban jungle to compare it to his actual jungle of Vietnam. So no, I'll leave that there. I feel like so much of what makes Taxi Driver great is full on spoiler territory, so I'm not going to go into it. But it is a classic, and I for me is Martin Scorsese's best film. So Yes, that's right. Goodfellas ain't appearing on my top 100. Sorry. Not that I don't like it. Goodfellas is a fine film, but yeah, not my top 100. Number 40 is Jurassic Park, 1993, Steven Spielberg. Is that 3 for Spielberg? It might be. I think it is. I think this is the third Spielberg movie on my list. Look at that. First hat trick. Jurassic Park needs very little introduction. They've used embryos and DNA to recreate dinosaurs on an island, and we have some characters come out of the island to survey it before it opens and sort of sign off on it and say it's safe and whatnot, along with a lawyer. And you got a great cast here. You got a wonderful score by John Williams, and you've got the childlike wonder of dinosaurs. And this one, holds a special place for me because Jurassic Park is the first movie I ever saw in theaters when I was 4 years old, and it made me obsessed with dinosaurs for a little bit. And the dinosaurs are great. The T-Rex is great. The Velociraptors are great. That first scene with the Brontosaurus, people like correct me on that. But like all the moments in this are so magical, and it's about the wonderment and about being just in awe of what's in front of them, and the characters emulate that for the audience, but the audience feels it as well. Seeing this in 1993, I'm sure felt like that. I mean, I say it that way because I was 4. I barely remember how I felt at the time because I was 4, but I still get that feeling every time I watch it. It's got some great scares in it. It's not really a horror movie, but there are some horror-esque scenes. Everyone always talks about the kitchen scene. Everyone always talks about, clever girl. The raptors are kind of scary. For a movie. Like, I'm not someone who gets really scared at movies, but, for a movie level, the raptors are kind of intense. So... No, and like it's obviously having seen it like tons and tons and tons of times. There's a lot of mistakes that I notice. I notice weird geography things that happen, and I'm sure one day we'll talk about this, in depth on the Ace. But because it is a science fiction film, it is like scientists recreate dinosaurs. That's sci-fi, baby. But I like Jurassic Park. Or what else is there to say really beyond dinosaurs are cool and. Comparing it to the sequels or other dinosaur movies, it's just got a perfectly paced story that is so tight, has a little bit of heart, and keeps the thrills coming. And the effects largely hold up. I mean, some of the CG obviously does look a bit dated, but they don't overuse it, which is why it doesn't affect it too much. Like the practical effects from Stan Winston, when they have a practical T-Rex head or whatever, look really good. And because of that, the few shots of CG that do look a bit ropey don't really drag it down that much. So, Jurassic Park, baby. In number 39, something completely different. We have Werkmeister Harmonies, which is a film that came out in 2000 by director Bela Tar. And this is a Hungarian film. It is in black and white, and it is pretty long, if I recall correctly. 145 minutes. It's 2 hours and 25 minutes long. And it is an art house film student's wet dream of a movie. It is full of long takes. In fact, every single shot in the movie lasts at least several minutes. In fact, the director once joked that the length of a film reel is a form of censorship to him because he likes to have his shots last as long as possible. But he likes to shoot on film, of course, because he wants the film look. And this film is beautiful. It is bleak. It is set in a small town where there's kind of this. It's a very cold climate. They're all kind of miserable, and they're kind of at this boiling point, and things kind of go over. And I don't really want to say much more about the plot because it's one of those films where I feel like I have to watch it several more times to try and like get at what the point of the film is. It's not entirely clear, I don't think, on a first viewing. But the reason why this ranked immediately so highly for me the first time I saw it is just how hypnotic the whole thing is. It's a beautiful film, wonderful score, and it's all these long takes where the camera's like swooping around, and you just feel in it. It's one of these things where like it's almost like just a bunch of technical exercises that's strung together with a thin plot, and it's magical. Like you're kind of into it. You're into this whale that comes in this little this fairground that brings a dead whale for people to come and see. And there's this wonderful shot going around the whale that ends in him looking at the eye. It's the poster, is him looking at the eye of this whale. is this bleak, depressing film, but it's beautiful and it's hypnotic. And the opening, again, everything about it is an art house student's wet dream. That's what it is. But it's one that clicked with me immediately. And I've seen a couple of his other films now, The Man from London, and The Turin Horse, and I've liked all of his films. My cat's running around mad. My cat Wesker's like darting around and making a lot of noise. So if I seem distracted, I don't think it's picking up on the mic, but it's definitely distracting me. So no, Werkmeister Harmonies. If you like the sound of what I just said, I would check it out. If you don't like the sound of what I just said, I would avoid it like the plague. But I love it. Number 38 is Moon, which came out in 2009, 10 years ago, and is directed by Duncan Jones, which that name kind of upsets me now because he's fallen so far from grace. But Moon is a film starring Sam Rockwell, and he is on the moon, as the title would imply. He's on his own. He's there working for a company. They're getting minerals from the moon, and he's just kind of there to oversee it and make sure everything goes smoothly. But he finds one day a clone of himself in a crashed moon buggy, and the film becomes about exactly what who he is, why there's a clone, and which one is real. But ultimately what this film is that it's a really great character study of this person and how his time on the moon has changed him as a person and his own character flaws. And it's about isolation, it's about feeling lonely, and it's all these things. It is a beautiful film. Once again, I've said this a lot in this part especially, but it's a beautiful score. Clint Mansell's music is absolutely stunning in this. My favourite moment of any film, I mean, there may be other films from 2009 on my list, but my favourite moment from any film in 2009 might be in this film. I will just say it's at the end of a phone call, and I'll leave it at that for anyone who's seen it. But it's beautiful, and again, like a lot of science fiction that I love, it's really just about humans. It's about humans and human nature, and this deep character study, while it has it wrapped up in this science fiction world. And everything on the moon looks gorgeous. Every time we leave the base and we're seeing the moon, we're seeing them drive through the moon. Everything just has this great look to it, and it's a fairly low budget film, but it's beautiful. And this movie, like, I didn't dislike Sam Rockwell before by any means, but this movie made me a Sam Rockwell fan, like, easily. Number 37 is M, which came out in 1931 and is directed by Fritz Lang. This is such a dark movie for its time period. Like, it's hard to, like, you get to the 70s and you expect like really dark, seedy little films about serial killers and things like that. But M came out in 1931, and it's a German film. Before that, but this is a couple of years before the Nazis even came into power in Germany. And this is a film about a child murderer who is being hunted by the police and other people in the city, and so much of the film is him just trying to escape and evade. And the film takes this really interesting approach where he's kind of a protagonist. We're kind of following the child murderer, and he's evil, but we follow him instead of anyone else primarily, and it gives you this really weird feeling of watching him trying to escape. And because he is the protagonist, you're not rooting for him, but you're kind of into the, like, you're expecting them to get him by the end because it's a movie, but like, is this how they get him? Is this how they get him? But it kind of almost has you rooting for him not to get caught, just so it's more exciting. Not because you're rooting for the child murderer, but he, is very great. And obviously, there's the famous screenshot of him with the M on his back, which is a wonderful moment in the film as well. But it's super dark. Beautiful. Fritz Lang knows how to, like, pace out scenes. He knows how to do suspense and tension and all that kind of thing. The film, I will say, if there's one critique, is that this is very clearly a very early film, and you can tell it came right after the era of silent films, because there's a couple of shots in this movie that look more like silent movie shots in terms of the frame rate and things like that. And I think it's because they still shot maybe like scenes of people walking in the street like that. Obviously scenes with dialogue were shot, as you'd expect them to be, but they were still kind of mixing and matching techniques a little bit. But no, it's a gorgeous film. It's very moody, very eerie, and you feel this like mob sense of justice, and it makes you question, like, are they being too harsh in a way, even though he's a child murderer, and of course he deserves to be caught and whatever else. But it really sort of looks at the mob mentality and the way that works instead. And there's a lot of great things in there. It's one that I've not seen in a while. I'm really excited about revisiting it. Maybe it's something we can sneak in on Influx or something at some point, because it's a wonderful little film. And Fritz Lang's a great director. Went on to make a lot of other great movies. And M's kind of one that stands up. Obviously, Metropolis being another big one, which came even earlier than that. But M is great, and I love the title. I love that it's just M for murderer, or M for murder. Whatever version you want to go by. Number 36 is The Thing, which is directed by John Carpenter, came out in 1982, set in Antarctica, where an alien entity kind of preys upon this research base and can invade life forms, whether it be one of the humans, one of the dogs, that kind of thing. And this is a film, of course, which is known for great practical effects, a lot of really over-the-top stuff. I love the setting, I love the seclusion. The paranoia, though, I think is the biggest thing this film has going for it. This idea that they don't know if any one of them have been taken over by the Thing. And, there's scenes where they try to test this and figure out ways to prove who's trustworthy and who's not. Wonderfully tense throughout. Like I say, the setting adds a lot to the film because they can't just go for help. And the extreme nature of the cold, the idea that as soon as they get outside they have to be bonded up, and they're only recluses inside, but they're trapped inside with a monster of some kind. And I think obviously the practical effects, which it's known for, are wonderful. There's some great over the top stuff with like sort of big spidery legs and like goopy flesh things and mouths opening up from various parts of the body that don't have mouths. And Kurt Russell, of course, along with the rest of the cast, Keith David sticking out as well. But Kurt Russell, of course, carries the movie largely as the main character. And it's not a movie with any jokes. There's not really much comic relief once things get going. It's a very, very strenuous plot where there's not any sort of like downbeat moments. Once it gets going, it becomes shit, I can't trust anyone, and things, this could be my end. And that's the movie never really lets up from that the entire time. And it's beautiful. Again, the setting adds a lot to it. It adds a lot of tone and atmosphere and character to the film, because you think of the Thing and you get that image in your head of the base and the images of being the cold, holding a flamethrower and things like that. And just wonderful experience, one of Carpenter's best. Number 35 is one I am probably going to have to defend the most out of this entire list, and that is The Dark Knight Rises, which came out in 2012, Christopher Nolan directing. And I expect shit for this because there's a lot of people who just don't think this is a good movie. They think this is easily the weakest of the three films of the trilogy, and they think there's a lot of stupid elements to it. And while I will agree that there's some criticisms, and ultimately maybe it's not perfect, but this is my list. This is about my personal attachment to films, and Dark Knight Rises for me is a fantastic Batman story. It's a fantastic story about that character, and essentially, we had an epic review of this earlier this year. We talked about it for over 90 minutes. It's about the hubris of Batman. It's about what makes Batman actually be Batman, and the idea of him buying into his own hype. It's almost a meta commentary on because Batman, and I think it's a wonderful story about his determination and about him overcoming his own ego to be what he needs to be again, and kind of rediscovering what it means to be the Batman and why the Batman exists in the first place, and about the legacy of the Batman. So all of this stuff, I love so much, and I think I love Bane in this movie. Some people hate the voice. I love the voice. The voice is great. It's not without its faults, of course. The film, there's definitely some things to critique, but I think for the personal journey of Batman in terms of an arc, it might arguably be the strongest arc of any Batman movie that's been made. And I'm not dissing any other Batman movies when I say that. There's definitely some that I don't like, but I think some of the older Batman movies, the Tim Burton and Schumacher ones, were very guilty of not really actually giving Batman a story. He was just kind of there to be Batman, and the story was always more to do with the villains. This story is very much about Batman. It's very much about what it means to be Batman, and what what mistakes are made along the way, and can Batman have anything else in his life, and the importance of Batman as an idea to the people who need him. And for me, all of these things hit the right notes. I've seen this film numerous times at this point, and despite what people tell me over and over again about why I shouldn't love it and why it has faults, it doesn't matter. Every single time, yes, I can see a couple of faults that I acknowledge and they're there, but ultimately, every time I am so invested into this. I love his comeback early on. I love his downfall. I love his re-comeback. I love all of it. The ending, the final 10 minutes is basically perfect. And it's emotional. I always get a little bit teary-eyed at the end of this film. Always. Every single time. Because it's about the idea of Batman, and the idea of Batman's the power of Batman. The whole idea of Batman is that he creates the myth and the legend of Batman because just being a man isn't enough. It has to be something more symbolic and immortal, I think he says in the first movie. And this movie is about that lasting. It's about that still existing and always being there when people need it, even if the man can't. So Dark Knight Rises is, for me, a wonderful film. It's a wonderful film about Batman, and a lot of Batman movies aren't really about Batman, so I appreciate that. But I think it's great. I think it's full of fantastic scenes, and Dark Knight Rises. Don't at me. Number 34 is District 9, 2009, directed by Neil Blomkamp, a director that everyone seems to hate these days, and I get that, Chappie and Elysium and whatever haven't been as good as District 9, not even close, that is fair to say. I still like how his films look, though. I think the look of his films, I always find it appealing from a science fiction point of view. I like his colourful yet grimy sci-fi is something that I really enjoy. And District 9 was one that kind of came out of nowhere for me in 2009 and blew me away. It's a wonderful story about Charlito Copley's character, if I'm saying his name correctly, who is dealing with these refugee camps, essentially full of aliens, full of the prawns, as they refer to them as. And ultimately, it's his arc about realising how awful he and other human beings have been. And first of all, it's a great action movie. There's some great action in this film, especially in the last half, but it's a very human story about what it means to be human and what prejudice is. And the concept of this movie is basically aliens come to Earth, but it's not about aliens trying to kill us. It's about what we do to them. It's about how we treat them. So there's obvious parallels to immigration and things like that in here, but all of that stuff plays really well, and it's about a human character who kind of has that journey and realizes and learns about, learns to care about other beings that aren't human beings, but they're intelligent life. But it's got great action scenes. Like, I love the final 30 minutes of this is a blast. I finished this the first time I watched it and was just like so hyped about it, because it was like, whoa, this was great. This was exciting, it was emotional, it had a great human character story at the middle of it, and it has actually, despite the fact that it's relatively low budget, has fantastic effects. It looks great, the aliens look great, the ship looks great, the mech suit, when that pops up, looks great. All good stuff. And it was kind of like, it really put me on this path of, Neil Blomkamp's going to make some great stuff, I can't wait till what he does next. And everything he's done since, I've still kind of enjoyed, but they've not been great. I understand why people don't like them. They've been nothing compared to District 9. And it's a shame that he keeps leaving projects that I think he's suited for. He didn't get to do his Alien sequel. He just left the Robocop sequel, which I was kind of into as an idea. He's apparently doing a horror movie now. We'll see if that works out. But I really hope, because he's a solid director who I think if someone else gives him a great script, I think he'll go make gold, because I think his visuals and the way he shoots action and sci-fi is wonderful, and I hope he really gets to shine again. But District 9 is not diminished by anything that came next. District 9 is a phenomenal science fiction film, and one of the best of the post-2000 era, I suppose, if you will. Number 33 is Once Upon a Time in the West, which came out in 1968 and is directed by Sergio Leone. For me, this is actually even better than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love Once Upon a Time in the West. And it's it's a very simple story. The railroad's coming through, and this widow is going to lose her land to it, and there's degenerates being sent to take her land from her, and the mysterious harmonica player and a desperado essentially team up to protect her and her land. And there's obviously some history in there, but the reason why this movie is so good is not the plot. The plot's fine. The reason why this movie is so good is the how it's shot, the cinematography, the standoff right at the start of the film when the character arrives in the train and there's these guys waiting for him. The phenomenal sequence where the group of bad guys kills everyone in a house, this entire family, and the music is so good. Like the music is amazing. It's just so evil, and it's got this really harsh guitar in it, but there's also this really sweet main theme as well. And it's good versus evil. It's the corporate evil guys trying to come in and think they can do whatever they want, and the heroes who stand up to say no, you can't. But it's it's executed through just wonderful cinematic scenes, like just these cinematic shootouts and fights that are just gorgeous. They make use of the frame, the full 2:3:5:1 frame. You've got people at either side of the frame, and just all of it is gorgeous. This is cinema, right? This is just to get pretentious. This is a movie when you watch it, this is cinema. This is how movies should be shot. They should be striving for something as beautiful as this. And yeah, Once Upon a Time in the West, fantastic. Number 32 is The Wages of Fear, which came out in 1953 and was directed by Henry Georges Clouzot, if I'm saying that correct, because it's very French. This is a movie about some poor workers who are given a very dangerous job of driving nitroglycerin across country. And it's a very bumpy road, and it's obviously a very unstable substance which could explode. So that's essentially what the movie is. There's a little bit of setup, but ultimately it becomes this journey where there's two trucks and there's two people in each truck. And it's the journey and it's the obstacles they face and the constant danger they face. This is a wonderful thriller. Borderline an action movie in a lot of ways when you think about it, but it's just such a simple idea. And it's one of the things where I kind of miss in movies, where I feel like movies like this or Duel from Spielberg or even Jaws, which we talked about earlier, I feel like there was a time when movie premises were just simple things that you could say in a sentence. People, poor people in a truck are forced to drive across country and could explode at any time from what they're carrying. It's a very simple premise, but it just takes that premise and becomes really inventive with how to handle what's all the things we can do with this premise, what's all the obstacles they could face, how do we build a story out of it. And something like Duel, which is just a truck chasing this guy in a car, what's all the things we could do with that. I feel like nowadays a lot of movies, they're obsessed with being as complex as possible, and I feel like it's actually much more impressive when you take a really simple one sentence idea and then make that complex in how you do it, but not make the plot itself the most complex thing ever, where it's convoluted and has all these moving parts and all these different things. And not that that can't be good as well, because it can be, but I feel like this type of movie is lost. And Clouzot is such a fantastic director. He really is. This is one that I saw because of Criterion, put it on Blu-ray, and I was super hyped to see it. And because it just sounded really cool and really simple and fun. And it is that, but it's exceptionally executed, where every little thing is and there's a moment in this movie where I gasp, because it does this great thing where it handles certain moments in really quiet ways without the obvious build up to things, where it really captures the surprise of certain things. And you really come to like the characters who are on the journey. You come to like them and care about them, and you don't want them to blow up. And it's really quite sad. So Wages of Fear is phenomenal, and you should check it out. It's a French film, of course, but by all means find it. Number 31 is Godzilla from 1954, directed by Ishiro Honda. Of course, it's the original Godzilla, and it's the one where Godzilla actually has some menace. It feels almost like a horror movie at points, and it's shot in black and white, and has this feeling of nuclear horror, this nuclear terror, where it is very much an analogy about the nuclear bomb and the devastation caused by the creation of nuclear weapons and all the fallout that comes with that, and humanity's struggle to try and kind of put that back in the box, as it were. Beautiful film. Out of all of the classic Godzilla movies, this one looks the best, and part of it's because it's in black and white and can hide some of the goofier elements of the suit or whatever, and part of it's just how it's chosen to be shot. The sequels try to just be fun monster movies where they're fighting and stuff, and it feels kind of silly in a fun way, but silly. This does not treat it like that. This treats it like a very serious film where they're terrified, and Godzilla's essentially murdering thousands of people as he storms through the streets. It's wonderful, and I think as far as science fiction films go, we often talk about them, what they're really about and what they're really talking about. This one's very in your face with what it's doing, but it doesn't matter. It takes it, and it was the kind of thing where, like, because it's so soon after Hiroshima and things like that, it's only been 9 years at the time the film came out. They weren't allowed to really make movies in Japan specifically about it, but they could do something like this. Honda could take something like a giant monster and use it as a metaphor for something else, and get his artistic vision out that way. And you can feel it. You can feel the passion. And he directed a lot of the other sequels, and none of them have this spark. None of them have this, even though a lot of them are a lot of fun. And Godzilla's an iconic monster for a reason. Looks great, sounds great. All these things, and the human drama, because it is taken more seriously, is not tedious like some of the sequels are. So yeah, it's a beautiful classic of a film which is iconic for a reason. Number 30 is The Shawshank Redemption, which came out in 1994 and is directed by Frank Darabont. This is one of those movies where you always heard people say it was great, but it's the sort of thing where when I was younger, it didn't sound like something I wanted to watch because it was a 2.5-hour prison movie. And what can I say? Prison as a topic is not something that's inherently exciting on its own. But this is a phenomenal movie. It's phenomenal. Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins are fantastic in it. It's such a great journey. Obviously, it's based on a Stephen King story, and it's this great journey about these two characters who kind of form a bond. And it's about hope. It's a film about hope, and the idea that I don't know if we know for sure at the start of the film. It's been a long time, since I watched it for the first time. I watched it for the first time in early high school, so I don't remember exactly how early we know for sure. But it's pretty, at least implied early on, that Andy is innocent and is in prison, and he's wrongly accused. And it's this idea of him hoping that he'll someday get out, and everyone else has given up hope, but he refuses. A lot of prison movies, I referred to Cool Hand Luke earlier on at one point in one of the previous parts about how that was about not having the characters will be broken, and it's about this strength of character. And Andy, despite the fact that he's not this tough guy, he's not this headstrong individual, he's a really smart person, but he feels very kind of soft and sensitive when he goes in, like he's definitely scared, understandably so. He over the course of time, like, he still has that hope, and he tries to make it happen the way he knows how to make his situation better. And I remember hearing the joke once that this is the only movie about a bromance that doesn't have a car chase in it, and it very much is that. It's about this relationship between these two characters and how one gives the other hope, and there's a lot of heart in here, and it's full of great moments as well. The two Italian ladies singing, that speech from Morgan Freeman, who, I think for a lot of people, this is the movie that made Morgan Freeman Morgan Freeman. He was in a couple of things before this, but this was the movie that made Morgan Freeman Morgan Freeman. and good, because he's wonderful, and we want Morgan Freeman around and things. But no, movie's beautiful. You even got a great villain in here as well, who you really hate. You come to root for some of these characters a lot. And and the movie, of course, is about hope, but it's also about redemption, because it's redemption. That's what it's in the title. it's right there. But the redemption isn't necessarily that of the main character, which is very interesting. So no, this is one of those movies where it's just fantastic from start to finish, and there's very little to fault in it. And it's one of those things where, I feel like an idiot for not agreeing to watch it sooner than I did. That said, though, I was probably the perfect age. Had I watched it any younger, it might not have clicked with me in the same way. But yeah, Shawshank Redemption is a classic, and it's a classic for a reason. And under no circumstances should have not won all the awards in 1994. Forrest Gump, well, not a bad movie, is not Shawshank Redemption, so sorry, Forrest, but you can run somewhere else. Number 29 is Old Boy, which came out in 2003 and is directed by Park Chan-wook. We're back to South Korea, and the second film in the Vengeance trilogy. Of course, we did the first one earlier on in this list. A man is in prison for 15 years, and he is not told why. He is just kidnapped off the street, and one day after 15 years, he is just let free with no explanation for why he was taken or why he's been let go, and he's told that he's got a week to figure it out. And that's what the film is. It's him trying to figure out why he was taken and delving into his past. He befriends someone and they go off looking for answers. And as a film about revenge, I'll save the plot from there. I'll just say that this movie has some fantastic scenes. It's got a fantastic score. Most notably, there's a one-shot fight scene in a hallway, which has been mimicked and parodied, and not even just parodied, but also genuinely inspired a lot of other great fight scenes in other shows and movies. And it's a phenomenal scene that stuck with me the first time I watched it. But no, the movie is wonderful, and it gets kind of dark at times. It gets kind of insidious at times with the subjects that it's tackling. It makes you feel a little bit irky, a little bit murky, in the pit of your stomach. But it's a really great exploration of revenge and how unhealthy revenge can be, I suppose, is maybe the better thing to say. But no, if you haven't seen Old Boy, do not watch the remake, which I've never even seen, but just don't watch it. Go watch the original and be wowed by the film. Number 28 is 3 Iron, so we're actually staying in South Korea for this one. So 3 Iron came out in 2004 and is directed by Kim Ki-duk. And this is a film where, very stylized, it's a romance film, and it's about a guy who breaks into houses and stays there whilst people are on vacation. Whilst they're away out of the country on holiday, he sneaks in and just lives there for the week to 2 weeks until they get back. You can tell from their mail that they're not there because he delivers things. And he breaks into a house, but there's still someone there. There's a woman around his age there. And of course, there's an awkward moment where he's going to try and just run because he's been caught. But she seems very sad. She seems upset about something. So he kind of tries to stay with her and, help. Because he's not an evil person necessarily. He's obviously questionable in what he does, but he's not an evil human being. And what's really interesting about this film is that these two characters never say a word to each other. This film, it's not a silent film. There is other characters talking at various points later on, but a lot of the film, especially the first half or so, where it's just these two characters in the house, is completely silent. And it's just through action and trying to help each other that they kind of have this romance that kind of blossoms. But of course, she does have a husband who eventually comes home after he's been away from a trip, and it sets up this wonderful... There's some great scenes in this. It's very touching and moving, and it's a wonderful character film because you really come to care about these characters, and you obviously over the course of it we come to realize why she is so upset, why she's in this bad place. But it's one of these things where I can love a great romance. Like, I won't necessarily get into a lot of rom-coms because they're very generic and have all the same tropes. This is a film which takes itself a lot more seriously, and it can be funny in places. Like a lot of Korean cinema, they can inject humor in places very casually, and it works really well. But it's by no means a comedy, and it's not beholden to those tropes, and it's just this very sweet story that, because it takes place almost without dialogue, it really builds the connection through visuals, and it feels like, and because of that, it plays very well as to people who don't speak Korean, because there's very little dialogue to have subtitles for. It's all visual, and because of that, the relationship plays just as beautifully to us as it would anyone else. So 3 Iron. Number 27 is Revenge, which came out in 2008 and is a German film directed by Götz Spielmann. This is another film that I know about because of Criterion. I got the Criterion Blu-ray, I blind bought it, despite the fact that Criterion Blu-rays are very expensive. There was a time when I was blind buying a lot of them, and some of them, bit me a little bit because I didn't love them, but some of them blew me away, and Revenge was one that just completely, blew me away. I mean, I'm trying to think of another way of saying it, but ultimately it's a film about a criminal, a thief, who's in love with his girlfriend, who's a prostitute, and is mistreated at her brothel, and he wants to like rob a bank so that they can run off together and start a new life. But when this happens, there's a police officer who's our other main character who, when tries to shoot him, actually shoots his girlfriend. And the film's about the thief trying to get close to the policeman's home life. Essentially, he figures out where he stays. He kind of befriends him as a neighbor. The idea being that he will eventually get revenge. And the film is great because it gives you both sides of the story. It gives you both of them as main characters, where you both understand why the thief wants to kill him or do something to upset him for revenge, but you also understand that the policeman's also just a character who ultimately we know was scared and was trying to do his job. And it's a very it's a very slow moving. There's a very quiet film. There's not a lot of music. It really paints upon the slow build and the awkward silences and the like. What is something about to happen with him? Is he going to do? Is this the moment where he finally does something, kind of thing? And it's you get kind of uncomfortable in certain scenes because he's there for nefarious purposes. And I love the ending. I love where it all goes. I think it's despite the fact that it's a very intense thriller, it's also got a bit of a human heart to it, and paints people as more than just being A or B. There's shades of grey. There's nuance to people. There's nuance to these characters. It's a wonderful drama. So I highly recommend Revenge because it's another one that I bring up a lot that people haven't heard of or haven't seen. So I'm thrilled to give people a chance to maybe go look for it. And finally, number 26, the final entry for this episode is Terminator 2 Judgment Day 1991, directed by James Cameron. Not a lot that I need to say on this, especially since I actually just recently recorded the big review for this for the Ace, which is actually just went up on patreon.com for early access at the time of recording. So by the time this goes up, it'll be less than a week before everyone gets the review of this. So I won't go into too much detail. I will just say that Terminator 2 is a movie that has been with me since childhood, much like the first film. And it's a phenomenal action movie with great villains, a great, meaning of human life story where the robot learns humanity kind of thing. And you got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton doing fantastic stuff. Robert Patrick's great as the T-1000. It was a leap forward in terms of effects, in terms of action cinema and blockbuster cinema. And it's full of memorable moments, tons of them. And I grew up watching this. And, it's one of those films where I could probably almost recite you what this movie is scene for scene, and not get it too wrong just because I've seen it enough times. And yeah, obviously music's fantastic as well. And yeah, so I'll leave it there because I literally just did like a very long discussion on this, and that'll be available for everyone soon. But Terminator 2, big part of my childhood, and it's one that of course has held up as I've gotten older because it's actually a genuinely really great film. So Terminator 2. And that does bring an end to part 3 of this top 100 films. Hopefully there's been some interesting picks here, some recommendations, that kind of thing. And I'll remind you once again before I say my outro and plug my various plugs. You guys can submit your top 50 movies of all time to mftvquestions@gmail.com. And they'll be given points based on their rankings. So number 1 will get X amount of points, and number 2 will get X amount, Y amount of points, or whatever, and so on and so on. And next month, in September, there'll be a results show of a top 100 as voted for by you guys via all your top 50s. And that should be good fun. So please do submit and just make it clear what your number 1 is, and you make sure they're all numbered and go from there. But other than that, you can, of course, let me know what you think of my picks in the comments. You can like and subscribe, all the usual things that help. Of course, you can help even more so by going to patreon.com/mailedfuzztv, where you can support us for as little as $1 per month, and you get bonuses, you get some early stuff, you get some exclusives, and then the higher tiers you get more things like voting rights and sponsorships and producer credits and all that kind of thing. But all of it does help. Every dollar counts, and every dollar helps keep producing stuff and making this more of a feasible lifelong passion that can keep existing for everyone. So do go and have a look. Otherwise, yeah, get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. You can get me personally on Twitter at Wibble89, or indeed on Letterboxd, also Wibble89. If you're not on Letterboxd, it's like a movie diary website, and you rate things and make lists and all sorts, and this is not the sort of place that you'd find me on. So Wibble89 on there as well. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. Do check out other movie review shows. I mentioned the ACE there, the Atomic Cinema Experiment. It's a sci-fi movie podcast where you can find my review of Terminator 2 and indeed Terminator 1 from a few episodes ago. You can find that there. There's also a horror movie podcast that I do with Tim called Screams After Midnight, and you can find me talk about horror movies on there. If this is somehow the first sort of stuff you've seen me on, there are some movie shows that I'm on a regular basis. You can go check out. But otherwise, that's me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, guys, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.